Hello everybody, Matt here, and welcome to this brand new episode of Colab. In this episode, I'm going to be doing this collaboration with a very fine fragrance reviewer, somebody who I'm very influenced by on the YouTube community in terms of fragrance reviews. I'm going to be doing this video with the one and only Lanier Smith from Sense Memory. Let's talk about our favorite fragrance houses. So, the fragrance house I've chosen is actually a house which I've always admired. It's actually a fragrance house which I think is very high quality. I've also enjoyed the company for many years. It's one of the first one of the first houses that I ended up buying fragrances from. So we're going to be talking about Giorgio Armani.
Now, the House of Giorgio Armani was launched back in 1975, and its main headquarters are in Milan, Italy. The house is served worldwide, selling to the whole world's population. Now, Giorgio was born in the Comune di Piacenza in northern Italy in 1934. It's the capital city of the province of Piacenza, not too far away from cities such as Milan and Bologna. Giorgio was raised with his older brother Sergio and younger sister Rosanna by his mother Maria Raimondi and father Ugo Armani. Now, for several years, Giorgio Armani actually studied medicine in school, but after 3 years, in 1953, he left to join the army. Armani eventually got a job working for Nino Cerruti, making some of the suits and other men's designs. After getting a lot of experience making suits for Nino Cerruti and having job experience at La Rinascente, Armani knew that the time would be right for him to open up his own designer company. So in 1975, he opened Giorgio Armani SPA in Milan. Now let's look at some of the classic fragrances launched from the company throughout the years. The first fragrance that was launched was back in 1982, and it was a perfume for women, a Chypre floral called Armani Armani. This fragrance is unfortunately discontinued, but it's known as a classic. The next fragrance was launched 2 years later, a fragrance for men called Au Pour Homme.
Armani Au Pour Homme, and this was the first men's release from the company. This is a beautiful fragrance. It's truly amazing. Citrusy, spicy, but it's also very leathery. It is truly a masterpiece in my opinion. Very beautiful. As you can see, I mean, this bottle design is for the vintage version. This bottle comes from, I believe, 1997. So I've had this fragrance for a long time. The newer version actually looks nothing like this. So yeah, but it's a beautiful fragrance, guys. Very high quality, and it's definitely a fragrance which you need to really try out if you want to get into a classic house like Giorgio Armani, because with it being the first release, this is certainly one you have to go for. And to be fair, Giorgio Armani actually used to wear this fragrance.
Now, the bottle that I have is actually a 90s version, so it is an older formulation, but I don't really see any differences between this formulation and the newer formulation. This is no doubt a beautiful fragrance, and it's actually the fragrance which I'm wearing right now. It's so beautiful that I think it's very unique, very classy, and for sure, very elegant. Now, there are a lot of flankers for this fragrance. In 2013, we saw a flanker for this fragrance called Eau de Nuit, which is a nighttime version with the note of iris, giving it that nice kind of lipstick sort of smell. Very beautiful fragrance in my opinion. Then in 2014, we saw a fragrance called Eau de Aromes, which is an amber fragrance. Very beautiful. And then in 2015, in other words last year, we saw Eau de Cedar, which is a cedar wood green fragrance. In my opinion, I think that the Eau de Cedar is a much more nicer fragrance than the rest of them. Very beautiful, but you cannot beat the classic. And in 1992, we saw on the shelves a brand new fragrance for women called Gio. This was a fruity floral fragrance for women, and it was actually inspired by the nickname given to Giorgio Armani from his friends. Then, in 1995, we saw a flanker called Acqua di Gio, which is a more aquatic version than the original. This fragrance was actually influenced on a holiday which Giorgio Armani had in a beautiful island in the Mediterranean Ocean. A very beautiful island which he inspired this fragrance on, a place called Pantelleria. A year later, in 1996, we saw a men's version of Acqua di Gio, a fragrance called Acqua di Gio Pour Homme. This fragrance is actually inspired again from the island of Pantelleria, but more based on the yachts that Giorgio Armani used to sail on in the Mediterranean Ocean. Inspired by sea breezes and salty sea air, this fragrance is heavily inspired by the true nature of the summer breezes in Pantelleria. A beautiful summer fragrance.
Here is my bottle of Acqua di Gio Pour Homme. This fragrance is really, really beautiful. Like, when I was explaining about, his vacation that he had and how it's inspired by the yachts and the sea breeze and the ocean, you can definitely see the inspiration inside this fragrance. It's very, very beautiful. Very summery, fruity, floral, a very refreshing scent. Very, very nice. But let's not forget about Armani Code. Armani Code is a masterpiece in my opinion. I've had this fragrance for probably about a year now, and I enjoy it so much. This is the one fragrance I usually go for whenever I wear a suit. It's truly, truly beautiful, and I actually have one of the flankers here. This is Armani Code Ultimate. There are a lot of other flankers for this fragrance. I believe there's about 20 flankers. There's a lot of them. So the house of Giorgio Armani is no doubt very high quality. We've seen so many amazing fragrances from this house. I just think that it's the history of it, the fragrances from this house are just so high quality, especially from the Privé line. Guys, if you have not heard of the Privé line, you need to check it out. This is it's almost like Armani's niche line, if you like. There's some really amazing fragrances from that line. I would highly recommend you check them out. So guys, thank you so much for watching my part of this collaboration. I've been talking about the amazing house of Giorgio Armani, but please let me put you in the capable hands of the one and the only, truly fantastic Lanier Smith from Sense Memory.
Hi everyone, this is Lanier Smith from Sense Memory, and I want to thank Matt for inviting me to join him in this collaboration on our favorite houses. So in honor of this collaboration, a bit of champagne. And you can't start off my house without a bit of champagne. So it won't come as a surprise to a lot of you that the house that I chose as my favorite house is the house of Chanel. Now, Chanel is one of the most influential and creative houses in the area of perfume and fragrance, but you need to know a little bit about the history. Now, before Coco Chanel came on the scene, before she opened her first millinery shop in 1909, the world of fashion and fragrance was very different. It was very restricted as far as clothing for women went. Fragrances were solely florals for the most part, just one particular floral note. When she burst on the scene in 1909 and began to change things with the combination of the arrival of World War I, she brought in influences from men's fashion. She brought in the usage of jersey, which is what we make our t-shirts out of. Only men wore jersey, working men wore jersey, and she brought in jersey to create a new whole freedom for women. Gone were corsets. Everything was loose and comfortable. She invented the women's suit. She invented beautiful beaded gowns for women in the 1920s for the flappers. Now, around 1921, she introduced her very first fragrance, which was, of course, the iconic Chanel No. 5. And here we have a bottle of Chanel No. 5. In 1921, Coco Chanel was introduced to Ernst Beau, who originated this formula in Russia for the Russian Tsar Nicholas, but after the revolution he escaped Paris, and he was introduced to Chanel via her Russian lover at the time. And you can read all about that and the incredible story behind this fragrance in a book called The Secret of Chanel No. 5 by Tila Museo. It's well worth reading. The whole history of this incredible, iconic fragrance is in there. So this was the fragrance that launched the house as far as fragrance is concerned, and is a classic to this very day. One bottle of this sells every 2 to 5 seconds in the world. It is so incredibly popular, #1 seller in the world. So then, of course, through the 30s, she worked in Hollywood for a little bit. She introduced her diamond collection in 1932, and she worked tirelessly up until World War II began. She closed up her shop, left it open, and only sold the perfume. And she was involved in a scandal during and after the war, where she was accused of being a Nazi collaborator. She was having a relationship with a Nazi by the name of von Dinklage. And she lived with him after the war. She was exonerated partly by the help of Winston Churchill. She lived then with Dinklage in Switzerland until 1953, when she returned. She entered a relationship with him and returned to Paris and re-entered fashion, and it is called The Return. It is a very famous period for her and her second wind in fashion. Now, the fragrance that I'm going to talk about now that she introduced was, she wanted in 1955 to create a men's Chanel No. 5, a fragrance for men that would be as iconic as Chanel No. 5. And what she came up with the wonderful nose of Henri Robert, was, of course, Pour Monsieur. This is the original 1955 formulation, not to be confused with Pour Monsieur Concentré or the new Pour Monsieur that is now out. This is something you can only get in Europe, Canada. So this was an incredible, and still is an incredible fragrance. This was my signature fragrance from the age of 21 until a few years ago, when I really got into fragrances and started exploring and realized you can't have a signature if you're a fragrance collector like I am. So in 1971, Jacques Paul created her personal favorite fragrance, which was Chanel No. 19. Then after her death, Jacques Paul came up with the beautiful Antaeus, which is an animalic, wonderful, randy fragrance from 91 that is just really beautiful. And then, of course, in 1984, they introduced the iconic Cocoa, which is a beautiful, spicy, heady, smoky, wonderful fragrance from the 80s. And it's quite unisex. Men and women can both wear it. It's really a gorgeous scent. Then, of course, after that, lots of other fragrances came. I'm only touching on a few of them because there are so many. And also, you can't forget the wonderful Les Exclusives line. The Les Exclusives line is really spectacular. The first 4 in the line are recreations from 4 of her iconic fragrances from the 1920s. And these are little minis that you can get of the fragrances from the Chanel boutique. And I have quite a few of them, which I've done some reviews on, and I just wanted to show you what the bottle looks like. It comes, of course, in this iconic 1920s inspired box, and there's this is the smaller version, the travel version of beige. So there you have just a little overview of my favorite house, which is Chanel, of course. And again, I want to thank the wonderful Matt for including me in his wonderful channel, which I really enjoy. So cheers. And remember, wear what you love, not what they say you should like.